And here comes the raid. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever is appropriate for your time zone. How is everybody today? Thank you, Writer Greg, for the raid. Hope everybody is all set and ready for another fun day of world building. I know I'm off to an earlier than usual start today. I don't know, Shy Red was on the calendar until a day or two ago, I think, and I guess she decided to bail. She's entitled. She's been doing a lot of work. Moonflower, thank you for starting off or stopping by. But you take care. Get a good night's sleep if that's where you're headed, or a good day's work if that's where you're headed. And we'll see you around here again, I'm sure, before the end of the day. Who else do we have? Coffee Quills? Yeah, you're also heading for bed soon, I'm guessing. Songbird, you got up early this morning. Good for you. AJ, hello. Black Maggot, hello. Writer Greg, of course, hello. Writer Greg is off to work, I know, for his real-time job too, his real-life job. Delian, the master of the happy trees. Okay, today, and hopefully every Thursday, good morning, Erin, how are you doing? Today and hopefully every Thursday, I'm going to be exploring how we use, or how we can use, World Anvil, not only for building our RPG worlds, but for actually creating and using RPG adventures. Now, I have a double motive in this. I'm not just looking for myself to put together an adventure stream that I can, run with in a game setting. Yeah, I do, of course, need to do that. But I'm also personally looking to actually someday get my adventures down on paper, or, well, whether it's electronic paper or physical paper is immaterial. But actually put the adventures together in some sort of publishable form. And that adds an extra challenge. And I'll tell you the quick backstory. When I first started thinking about doing this, I asked around on the Discord, and the general consensus was, Bob, if you're trying to publish adventures out of World Anvil, just don't. Go somewhere else. Find some other tool at least to do that. World Anvil isn't ready to do that yet. My response to that was, okay, challenge accepted. And I spent a lot of time yesterday looking through the stuff that we do have handy. And while I'll admit it is far from perfect, I think it's enough to get started. So what I want to do today is actually take a walk through the assets that are available in World Anvil, to both, and again, I'm looking at the double focus here, to both run an adventure for your friends and to long-term document that adventure, or in some sort of publishable form. And I think the bits and pieces are there. It's going to be a little kludgy, but it's probably better than nothing. And yes, and maybe it will end up being a great way to start making recommendations to expand the tool set. That would be my hope. So before we get going, let's see what's going on today. Coffee, you've got about 2 hours. Good. Oh, glad to have you for the 2 hours. Delian is drawing happy trees as we speak. He does that all day. Yes, Songbird challenge accepted. Rawr. Yes. Hopefully some good feedback will come out of this. What, and let's, jumping right into it. Here's what I found. There is a plot template. All right, that in the system, in the set of standard templates. And I could kind of tell that clearly the plot template was originally designed for the writing world, the novel, short story, etc. world, more so than the RPG world, and that's fine. I mean, that's let's face it. Originally, World Anvil was a gift to a writer, so that's to be expected, and that's fine. And they've definitely, I mean, from what I'm hearing and what I see there now, because I'm new to the tool myself, but it's come a long way toward helping RPG folks. I mean, you have the whole campaign system. Managing and running a campaign is definitely doable from within here. But anyway, looking at the plots, the plot template, and also looking at some of the additions that I understand were courtesy of the great GM, and I also watched his videos and a few other odds and ends. I was doing a lot of research on this stuff yesterday. So anyway, here's what we come up with. All right, there's one plot template, but there's 2 tracks in the template, and here's what the template looks like when you open it. And you'll see I put a bunch of words in here, and you'll see what all this does in a minute. But down here, there's something that we don't usually see in a template. All right, and there's these 2 buttons. There's one for adventure and one for adventure phase. So what I've actually done is I've created 2 articles that are just kind of demonstrator articles to show what these things look like and where things go and what sort of information you can put in them. And we're going to look at them in 2 forms. The first form is the form we're all used to, which is what does it look like if you actually just bring up the article in view mode. Now, this isn't, you wouldn't use, if you're using the campaign system, this is not what you're going to see exactly. But it's a good way for us to kind of dissect the template and see what's available to us. Alright, and this is the one, again, for, do I have the wrong one? Let's see. This is the one I want to start with, sorry. This is the top level one. Alright. So this is what happens if you open up a plot template and you push the adventure button. Alright, these are the pieces you get. First of all of the adventure specific stuff shows up in this little panel at the very top of the screen, and you can see let's look real quick what's in here and what we can use and what maybe we can or can't, what we're going to want to focus on. You have an objective. What do you want your characters to achieve in this adventure? And it could be very specific. It could be, they need to find a certain piece of some puzzle or track down some bad guy or whatever it is. There's a theme section just to remind you of what your overarching campaign level plan or color is. So that's there as well. Remember, this is not just this is the adventure level, not really the campaign level, but we're going to get back to that in a minute too. What type of adventure is it? And there were 5 choices for that. And if we jump down, or 4 choices rather, you can have either what the great DM calls thwarting, delivering, collecting, or discovery. Thwarting is the objective is to stop somebody from doing something. Delivering is physically, bringing an object from where you are to somebody else. That object could be another character, rescue, or deliver the princess to her intended husband or whatever. Collecting, which is the other way around, go somewhere, get something, and bring it back. And discovery, which is kind of a catch-all. discovery could mean, just explore the dungeon and find the missing piece of whatever, which the characters may or may not actually know they're supposed to get. I am behind on my coffee intake, so I'll have to keep alternating that with my water. So anyway, that's what type means up here. The focus. Let's jump back down here again and look at that. And again, Great GM gives us three choices here. Is this adventure part of your overarching master campaign plot? Is this adventure kind of a side quest but focused on an individual or group of characters? This might not advance your master plan, but it might be an adventure that resolves some issue that that the party, caused or got involved in with some other bad guy or even some other good guy or whatever. It's a side adventure, but it's a side adventure that actually brings some sort of resolution or closure or continues some side, some sidebar story. And then there's other, which is it's neither of those. So this could just be a one-off. You need to throw together an adventure because only half your party shows up, and you don't want to run your master plot. So you have that option here too. And then the last one of those three things up here, the drop downs, are main adversary type. And I know somebody was talking about these last night. You've got Nemesis, Villain, and Henchman, and those are in decreasing power order, shall we say. Nemesis, that's the really, really big bad evil guy for your whole campaign. And it may not be a person, it could be an organization, it could be a kingdom, it could be a god, it could be whatever. But that's the to use the video game analogy, that's the final boss fight. All right, or the character, the person or thing involved in the final boss fight. Villains, those are the intermediate level boss fights. All right, it's a bad guy. It's probably a powerful bad guy. But taking care of him doesn't solve the whole problem. It doesn't resolve the campaign. You may not kill the villain at the end. You may, the adventure may end with the villain running off to fight another day. I mean, that's entirely up to you. And then there's henchmen, and that's your basic run-of-the-mill. They could be random encounters, or we wouldn't be plotting or building random encounters, but those are the run-of-the-mill encounters. That again, they're necessary to advance the campaign or to advance a side story or whatever. But there's no particularly dangerous bad guy at the core of the whole thing. I mean, it might be a bunch of orcs, and there might be a war leader or something with them, but he's not really the big bad evil guy. He's just a slightly more powerful mook that you're fighting. So what else do we have up here for the campaign adventure? Now there's a couple of questions that are asked. All right, and these are important as you're planning what you're going to write. What do we expect? All right, list what we expect from this kind of adventure, and then work out how you're going to make it different. All right, and what must the players learn? And there were no tooltips for this, but it's a pretty obvious question. These two questions really are asking why do we have this adventure? Are the players going to learn something important? It might be something about the world. It might be some important secrets that they need to advance their plot. The whole campaign and so forth. And then below that, there are 3 act sections. And again, this kind of, it's structured like a typical 3-act story, play, movie, book, whatever. All right. In Act 1, you've got, Act 1 is basically all the setup stuff. You need to tell the adventurers, the party needs to learn what the objective of or what they think the objective of the adventure is. They need to have some inkling as to what might be in their way, the introduction, the intro enemy, and any other situational things. So this is all kind of the setup stuff. And then they have to go wherever they're going, and take their first shot, and possibly take their first shot at resolving it. But again, if we're writing a good story, and again, these things still kind of lean back to story, although we're in an RPG world here. You don't want them resolving it on the first crack, and from an adventure development standpoint, or for an adventure session standpoint, you don't want there to just be one combat that resolves the whole thing. That's not fun. So they have an initial combat, or they have an initial encounter with whoever or whatever, that resolves, and even if it resolves successfully, they realize they're not done. They got to keep going. And then you go into the to the real meat of the stuff, and there's a couple options here. Again, under Act 3, the headings that appear are False Ending, right, and Final Showdown. So yet again, we have an opportunity for some sort of encounter or event where hey, this time we got them, and they go in and they do what they got to do. And again, it might just be solving a puzzle, or it might be a combat encounter. It could be almost anything. After they finish that one, lo and behold, no, they're still not quite done. And then you finally come to the final climax where everything gets resolved. They either win, hopefully they win, possibly they lose, and that kind of wraps it up. But you can see the intent behind all this is good planning for building an exciting adventure. You set it up at the beginning. You have some interesting stuff happen along the way. They take a couple of cracks at solving the problem. And again, in RPG speak, this is this is multiple encounters. All right, this kind of defines a classic 3-encounter adventure. And then the last few bits here, are again interesting questions to ask yourself. Well, one of them is a tool, and the other one is an interesting question or important question to ask yourself. There's a list of name sections in here, and this is good. And I know, again, a few people were talking about this last night. I think E. Songbird, you kind of hit this too. Just a good idea to have as a DM is a list of potential NPC names, because invariably, all right, you're going to have situations where your characters, go into a town or whatever, and I've had this happen to me all the time. They go into town to buy supplies. One of the characters, I'm going to go to the baker's shop and buy some bread. Great, fine. Baker's over there. All right. From a game standpoint, all I need them to do is turn over a few gold pieces or some coppers or silvers or whatever, and they get the bread. What's the first thing the player asks? What's the baker's name? Okay, now you having a list of names, and if you have multiple races with different naming types, you might want to have several lists of names. But having 8 or 10 names handy that you can then just, the baker's name, well, okay, it's George Armstrong. You just pull it off your list. All right, you make a little note to yourself that this guy is now the baker in such and such a town. and at the end of the session or before you prep your next session, you take him off the list. You know, you put him in some other note somewhere, you take him off the list, and you put a new name on the list, so that you always have a handy supply of just, you know, essentially random names to give various characters that may or may not, you know, be encountered. Now, he suggests 10 names. You should look at your own campaign. I mean, if people are going to run into humans a lot, you're going to want a lot of human-sounding names. If they're going to run into gnomes, you're going to want a lot of gnome names. If they only ever rarely meet an orc that they're not going to just swing an axe at, then you may not need 10 orc names, but 5 might be enough. So that's kind of up to you. So after that, then you get into the standard plot template stuff, and this is the stuff that, you know, that I guess Dimmy put in however long ago. The first section in the plot template is the basic summary. Most of the other articles kind of call this a vignette. There's actually no heading for it in the editor. It's the first box that you get at the top of the general content tab. It's unlabeled, but when it prints out like this, it prints out a summary. So that's probably where you're going to end up putting the meat of any kind of real documentation or writing that you're going to go with. The entire rest of this template is planning material, and it's very, very valuable. And my suggestion, if you're starting to write an adventure from scratch, is to go through this template. You may not use every one of the sections, all right, but there are important questions and things you need to think about along the way here. And let me catch up with the chat stream, because it's been going crazy lately. How far do we have to go back? Okay. Black Maggot working on a map. Don't know how long we can stay. Well, stay as long as you can, please. Coffee Quill is back to the PC. I need to add to my DM binder. Yeah, we're going to get to that, and we're going to get to how we can use this for an actual session. Yeah, Songbird, you were using the lazy DM template. I'm going to have to take a look at that. I haven't looked at it yet. Songbird, what idea just had Gabby? Have a list of names connected to the main area of your world, of your article. Yeah, Janet has suggested this as well. That's right, the multiple names. Add some random NPC names into your major towns. That's another tip or trick for every town that your adventurers are going to walk through. You can rely on that list of names that we talked about, but it probably wouldn't hurt to take 2 minutes to make sure that the bartender at the tavern has a name, the baker has a name, the butcher has a name, the guy running the general store has a name. And the one other one that's absolutely, if there's a church or a temple in the town, make sure the cleric has a name, because if you have a cleric or a paladin in the party, they're gonna say, "I'm gonna go to the temple." All right, it happens every time. So do yourself a favor, and even if all that character does is answers a question or tells the party, sorry, I can't help you, at least they have a name, so that when they ask, what's the cleric's name? Because again, every party has somebody who's taking notes and writes down the name of every person or character they've ever encountered, because they might be important someday. Have names for those guys. Have names for the characters that you kind of expect the players to interact with, even if those interactions are trivial. It just saves fumbling at the table, which messes up the action stream. So anyway, going through these things real quick. I'm going to come back to plot points and scenes later, because that's actually where the meat of the good stuff is. Again, themes. there was a theme thing up top as well. It's kind of repeated here. The tip is a little longer here. Themes are cues you inject into your story to reinforce the feeling of your genre. They are repeated actions, visuals, or events. So this is really just a reminder of how you want to describe what's going on. Examples might include the fact that butterflies appear randomly in the darkest hours of night, or that for some reason all encounters revolve around ruined churches. Credit to Adamal, the narrator, for the idea and the examples. What do we got? Oh, there's there's the fantasynamegenerators.com. Thank you, Aaron, for putting that link in there. It's very easy to throw together. By the way, what I like to do too is I don't always like the names that it suggests, but I can almost all the time put together names from the pieces of what it suggests. All right, so you can do that too. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the flavor of your world too. One of the sections in Fantasy Name Generators, there's one whole set of choices for that. There's a tab called Fantasy Names where you can go down and it'll give you orc names and goblin names and gnome names and dragon names and so forth. But of course, they're all with a certain flavor. If your world has a different flavor, you're going to have to maybe make some adjustments. There's also a section that they call real names, where they have 150, 200 different nationalities or ethnicities, and somewhat representative names from each of those. If you have a world where you've got Romanian flavor over here and Celtic flavor over there, you can use that. Again, you might want to tweak the names a little bit. That's up to you, or you can just pull them right off the lists. But Fantasy Name Generator will generate lists of 10 names, just at the click of a button. So anyway, we do themes. Then we get into structure, and again, this is a reminder of how to build something that's fun and exciting. And again, it's although it's focused on writing, it still applies to campaign running. All right, you have exposition, and if you remember up at the top of the other section, the first thing you do is introduce to the players what's going on. That's the same thing here. All right, you're very early on, you want the characters to at least think they know what they're doing and where they have to go to do it and who they might have to encounter on the way. Then there's conflict, the next piece of the standard writing pyramid. Conflict, part of the pyramid which sometimes omitted or merged with the introduction. Again, you might. This describes, in our world, it probably is going to be combined often. Again, why are they doing, you're telling them what they need to do. Well, why do they need to do it? You need to go and free the prisoner from the keep, because if you don't, then, this horrible war is going to happen, or some, whatever. Rising action, now the characters have set out, and you have some tension building. You want to throw an encounter or two at them along the way, just to raise the excitement level. Coffee time. Do dinos drink coffee? Yes, they do. Climax, this is a peak. This is a major fight. Falling action and resolution, is kind of the wind down at the end. And again, there may, by the way, you might have that rising action, climax, falling action happen once or more than once along the way, depending on how extended your adventure is. And then at the resolution, we're now at the end, and the characters need to know when they're done with the whole adventure, were they successful or not, Oh, by the way, Tillers, besides reminding it was time for coffee, thank you for the bits. It was very nice of you. Um, the characters need to know, or at least think they know, whether they succeeded or failed. And in our world, that's also going to be kind of, pardon, my wires are attacking here. It's also kind of a, you could start to lead into the hook if it's especially if it's a main plot adventure. You start, you're leaving hints at what they're going to be facing next time. All right, now we can go into again the goals, and again these are all things that you want to have in mind as you're building or planning the adventure. All right, goals. What is the intended resolution of the of your party? All right, why do they want to do these things? All right, hooks. Now, these things, by the way, I think are very interesting because they're what connect an adventure into a campaign. Hooks, so as the name denotes, are pieces of action or knowledge which aim to nudge the protagonist into action. Again, these go to the question of why do they want to actually do what it is you've set up doing. You need to make sure they understand why it's important that they undertake this particular adventure. All right, which makes the characters want to undertake this particular adventure. If you don't have good hooks, you run the risk of sitting down at the gaming table, with your carefully prepared adventure, and you start to introduce it, and the characters say, "Yeah, no, we don't want to do that. We want to go over here." All right, and now you're ad-libbing for 4 hours, and that is never, ever, ever fun. So think about your hooks. Stakes are again counters to hooks. They aim to add the drama and substantiate the goal. This is it's related to the hooks. Hooks tell you why you want to do something. Stakes tell you what happens if you don't. All right, and both are important toward pushing the characters in the direction you want them to go. Moral quandaries. This is especially fun if you have characters that have, if alignment is a thing in your world, or something like alignment and behavior patterns are important. Do you want to introduce moral quandaries? Sometimes you want to do it on purpose, not only just to see how the characters react, but to make it more interesting for the player. All right, to role play. All right. I know I'm cruel and evil, but in my last campaign there were a number of situations, for example, where I had the party. Here's one that comes to mind. The party encountered a small village, actually. It was very small, like a family unit kind of thing, of ogres that were blocking a mountain pass that they needed to get through. So they tried to talk their way through. That didn't work. The ogres attacked, so needless to say, they wiped out all the ogres. Well, after wiping out all the ogres, they went into one of the little crude lean-tos that the ogres had set up and found an infant ogre that had survived the fireballs or whatever else it was that wiped out the rest of the group. What do they do now? All right, here's this little infant, can't hurt anybody, can't hurt anything. They are 2 weeks into the wilderness, so they can't take it with them. They can't, what do they do? So they quickly realized that they had they only had two practical choices because they couldn't take it with them. They either leave it there to starve to death over days, or they put it out of its misery. Neither one was an appealing situation. They struggled over it. The party actually struggled over it for a good 45 minutes before they finally decided to put it out of its misery and move on. But they weren't happy about it. 2 or 3 of them, as soon as they finished that adventure, ran to the nearest temple to atone and all kinds of things. So from an, like I said, it was cruel, it was horrible of me, but from a game standpoint, it introduced a lot of tension, it introduced a lot of character development, and it introduced a lot of role-playing opportunity. When it was all said and done, the players, while of course they started out by calling me all kinds of horrible names, but then they thanked me for putting it in there. They said it was a lot of fun to play. So, yeah, that's the beauty of playing in fantasy worlds. We can do things that you wouldn't ever really dream of, or hope you never have to do. And that brings us right to the next category, which is cruel tricks. Clearly, this was, the infant ogre was a moral quandary that turned into a cruel trick, or that was a cruel trick at the same time. But again, these are things that add flavor. These are things that really invoke role playing, and if that's your goal, if your party is a bunch of dice rollers, again, we've all heard this. There's roll 2L players and there's roll LE players. If your party is roll LE players, then moral quandaries and cruel tricks are valuable tools to challenge your players to play their parts. All right, if the players really don't care about all this and all they want to do is kill things and roll dice and kill things, then don't waste your time too much with them. And the last one are red herrings, and red herrings are fun. This is where you give them what looks like an important hint or clue to the next stage, and maybe this is important, and you spend time describing an item they found or whatever, and it really has nothing to do with anything. Now, you can't just... If you're going to introduce a red herring, you do have to put a little bit of work into it, but it's kind of there for fun for you, and you need to take it in that spirit. I mean, you get to watch them, go down a rabbit hole that doesn't lead anywhere. And yes, they're going to end up frustrated. You don't want to do too many of these, because if you do too many, the party is quickly going to decide that nothing is important, and that's never good either. So, but again, it's good and fun to keep them in mind and to introduce them from time to time. And again, they're kind of part of the whole puzzle aspect of the game. All right, if you happen to get the balance just perfect, you'll have a party that's constantly wondering, is this the thing I need to find? It looks important. Let's hold on to it, or let's explore it, or let's do whatever. And maybe it's the right thing, maybe it is the ultimate goal, and maybe it's not. If once in a while it's not, it keeps the party on its toes. The next parts of the template, this we can go through real quick. Relations. These are the players. Not the character players, but these are the actors involved in the game or in the scene. All right, and they generally fall into one of 5 categories. All right, you have the protagonists. That's your PCs. That's easy. You have allies. These are NPCs. They could be friendly monsters or creatures. They could be mounts. They could be whatever. But these are the things that are there to help the party. You have the neutrals or bystanders. There's always a few of those. You have competitors. You may or may not have competitors. I mean, the obvious competitor situation would be, you're trying to steal an object, but so is somebody else. Competitors are people who will work against your party, but usually because they have similar goals. They may even be, similarly, again, if you're playing with alignment, they might be similarly aligned. What happens if you go out to slay the evil dragon and, 2 days out you run into a camp of NPC adventurers that are out to slay the evil dragon? Do you team up? Do you do you now have a race to see who gets to the dragon first? I mean, that you can play games with a lot of things. Thank you for the hydrates. And then you have adversaries. Adversaries are the bad guys. Everything from the simple monsters in a random encounter up to the big bad evil guy at the end of the whole campaign. And lastly, we have backdrops. And backdrops is both physical and historical. You want to know where the action is going to take place. You want to know what the overarching dangers or threats are. You want to now start laying out exactly what sorts of encounters are going to be involved in the adventure. And it's also good to know, again, this past events, especially when you're laying out a location. What else happened here? Now, this is you need to be careful with past events that world building syndrome doesn't set in. But for example, if the party goes into a dungeon and in the first room, they come across, maybe a couple of bones and some rusting armor and stuff like that. Why are they there? Were they, the remnants of some guard that died, that never left his post and died on duty? Are they remnants of another adventuring party that came through years ago? You don't have to go into excruciating detail, but you want to understand where those things came from. There's a couple of other interesting examples here. Events that may have left a trace, like gear or bodies lying around. You want to know in your mind why those bodies are there. All right, they're not just dungeon dressing. They're, what are those bodies? Are they? Was it somebody that that the dragon dragged in and munched on, and this is just the leftover bits? You need to know why every piece of decoration is in your encounter space, and that includes, again, signs of previous encounters or fights that may not have been with the party. They may be as simple as an etching on a tree. Again, a good way to leave clues or hints. If you're on your way to fight the dragon and you there's a tree with an arrow etched on it, pointing in the direction that you're headed. What does that tell the party? Well, it tells them, first of all, they maybe they're on the right track, but it also tells them that somebody else was here before. So, what does that mean? And that wraps up that whole template. So what we have here is a template at the whole adventure level that gives us a lot of tools for building the adventure. Maybe not so much for writing it and presenting it, but certainly for building and planning it. And they're very valuable, and I would suggest, again, if you're building adventures from scratch, go through the template, and I would say that you should want to fill out most, if not all, of these bits and pieces in your own mind. And if you do, you should end up with a nice, well-structured or well-thought-out, from an action flow standpoint, adventure. Now, the one I left out, and I'm going to jump back to now, is plot points or scenes. All right, this is where you actually start getting into the details of building the adventure. This is where you lay out, I'm going to have 3 or 4 encounters, and in the first encounter this is going to happen, and the second encounter this is who they're going to meet, or they're going to have to go from here to there, and so forth. I mean, this is the section where you're really starting to build. You've laid out all of your groundwork through all of these bits and pieces. All right, then you come back up to plot points and scenes, and you start, really digging into it. Now, the other things that are in the templates, just to make it easier for you, there are long text versions of things, again, like locations here. The template also, right next to that, gives you a place where you can link in articles relating to the locations that you mention. All right, so this is a World Anvil, specific feature, obviously, but it gives you a way to have at your fingertips any additional information that you may have for these. And there's one of them for locations. This related characters and organizations, that relates to the whole relations section. And this could be good guys, bad guys, neutrals, and so forth. And then subplots, which actually relates to this plot points and scenes area. And then plot type is just a header section up at the top. All right, so now you've noticed I actually do have a child plot in here. And that child plot is, and I can click it here or I can click it here. The child plot that I have here is the other end. It's the what happens when you hit, and actually we do here, what happens when you hit the adventure phase button. It makes sense that an adventure is going to consist of more than one adventure phase. So now let's look at the adventure phase. First thing I'm going to do real quick is mention, now we're at the adventure phase. First thing I'm going to do is mention that all of the stuff down here below is exactly the same, because it's the same plot template. So all of these things are here. You may or may not want to go back through them again just for the specific phase that you're dealing with. Maybe you will and maybe you won't. And actually I'll go back to a situation where you might want to in a minute. The only other difference is because of the relationships, you'll notice this one says parent plot instead of subplots. So this gives, so again, wherever you are in this tree, you can, from the sidebar, quickly bounce up and down in levels. The places that things change, though, are those extra boxes up at the top. And you'll see that for the adventure phase, we still have an objective and a theme, which were the same as before. But now we have what the great GM is called the opening scene or situation. This is, again, for this particular phase, what's going on? How do you want it to open up? And he adds in this coolness factor. Why, this is an encouragement to make it exciting, not just you walk down the road and the orcs jump out. All right. Again, this is probably at the lowest level. These adventure phases, this could be an encounter. So how do you describe it? So this gives you an opportunity to think about setting that scene up. You get to describe, the woods are really thick. There's a lot of undergrowth. This looks like a great opportunity for an ambush. All of a sudden the birds fly in a direction, or if you want to give hints or whatever. So it gives you the chance to actually think about, ratcheting up the tension before the, instead of, like I said, and the orcs jump out and raise their swords. We need to be good storytellers, to be good DMs and to encourage role playing. So the other thing that this provides is a list. Again, these are select lists that link back to other articles that you may have written. I do have one problem with one of these. There's one called Monsters, which is great, but the only choice it gives you, the list of things to choose from, are species templates. Now that's fine, but I, for one, do not intend to create a species article for every one of the 423 different things that are in the bestiaries for Pathfinder 2. And I doubt very much any of you are going to create 427 or however many it is species articles for every creature that exists in the D&D monster manuals. So I would personally like to see choices other than just species for monsters. I'd like to actually be able to bring in, there's the break between monsters and NPCs is a gray area that needs to be looked at, I think. NPCs brings in persons. All right, and in fact, here's an example. I mean, I just grabbed a few names from things that I've been working on, and yeah, one of these is really an NPC. All right, Theodric Pinman is a real NPC in my world, so there he is. Bannock the Brownie could arguably be an NPC, but could also arguably fall into the monster category. All right, so who knows where you do that? You're going to have to deal with it for now. And then maps is self-explanatory. All right, any maps you have, whether this is area maps, regional maps, battle maps, if you want to include them in here, that's up to you. And then the last few things, again, these are here for color and flavor. What do we expect? What do we think this particular encounter is supposed to be like? Is it a battle scene? Is it a puzzle scene? What's the mood that we want to set, or what's the attitude we want to get out of the party as they go through it? And the sight, sounds, touch, taste, smell. I think this is called senses in the edit on the edit page, but it comes out as this. This is very much like the names, but at the encounter level, so the players are in a certain place or spot. Write down a bunch of phrases that you can use to describe what they see, what they smell. This is where you have little phrases. Dust covers. Centuries of ancient dust cover every surface. There's a musty smell. Of faint, musty, faint smell of decay in the air, or whatever. You come up with a bunch of those, and just have them here at your fingertips. Because that's again something parties do. What do I hear? You hear the slight whistling wind, in the distance coming down the corridor. Or you hear the. If you listen quietly, you hear the faint yells and moans of prisoners in some far-off dungeon. Whatever it is you want to do. Coffee insists that I hydrate, so I will. Again, they're here to, pardon the puns, to your descriptions. And having a bunch of examples, or at least thinking about in advance, what does this room smell like? What does it look like? What does the party see beyond the obvious? Not just there's an altar and there's this and there's that, but is there dust on covering things? Is there? But you need to also think about what those things mean. Dust on the floor is an important one, because the first question, as soon as you say there's centuries of ancient dust on the floor, the next thing the party's going to ask is, are there any footprints? Which means you need to be prepared to think about whether or not any other currently mobile denizens of your dungeon might have walked through this room in the past 200 years, because if they did, there's going to be footprints in the dust. All right, maybe they're new footprints, maybe they're old footprints. So it helps you, again, by thinking about these things in advance. You're prepared to answer these questions at the table, all right, without having to stop and think about it and hem and haw or change your mind. All right, that's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody else. You have a dust-filled room, and you just casually describe it as covered with dust. And in the next room are a bunch of guards. Well, if there's a bunch of guards in the next room, Why aren't there footprints all over this room? You know, so those are the things that you have to think about. And these templates are designed to help us think. So with these, and with the fact that you can nest them, and now I'm going to come back to the campaign system to see how we start actually using these things. And we'll be able to see how we use them if I create a campaign session. Now, those of you who've never used the campaign interface, now is where things start getting fun. Have I missed anything important in the chat? Jumping back up a little bit. Tillers, yeah, red herrings are the best. Roasted to a certain crust. Yeah, that's the other kind of red herring, I guess. There's lots of stuff up here. I'm sorry about that. See, this is what happens when I get talking. I just saw a beautiful skull with a rose. Ooh, shiny CQ hooks through your weak spot. Yeah, I mean, yeah, having the prompts in front of you, or you know, is a good thing. All right, so obviously I've been playing around a little bit in this sample campaign or test campaign. But if I come to story and hit plots, all right, you'll see that what it's given me, because I've put them in here. I have, these are the two templates that we played with, and you'll notice the one is nested under the other. So I have an adventure, and I have an adventure phase. Now, you know, if I'm designing a real adventure, I'm probably going to have several adventure phases. Right? And I can come to manage campaign plots. I don't remember what this does. I'm still exploring that. That's right. That brings me to this view. Again, you see them nested. You can add additional ones. You know, we can come in and out and edit these, but this gives us a way to actually work with those. All right, so let me jump back, because what I want to do actually here is demonstrate what these things look like. Now, you know, we showed before what they look like if you do the view, you know, the article view. Now the question is, what do they look like in the storyteller screen, which is what we're kind of looking at here. And here's the important thing for those of, especially for those of us out here that that are used to spending, you know, lots of time on CSS to make everything work and look beautiful. The first thing we learn is that there's a whole different control tree of CSS that governs how these things look. All right, so all of your fancy formatting and heading and everything else is out the window. What I'm missing something good here. Let's see. Coffee Quills, thank you, Brain. Saw a series of 5 books that sparked an idea. Mail order brides of the apocalypse. Seriously, have enough works in progress. Thank you. Relax a bit. What an idea, though. Did I miss a good idea? Or just the mail order brides of the apocalypse? Okay. Hydrate. I've come to realize that my voice doesn't actually finish waking up until about noon, which is unfortunate because all my streams end by noon. I can talk constantly for a lot longer in the evening hours, but we'll have to live with this. All right. So anyway, all the stuff is here, and the structure and the layout is here. The actual formatting is different. But we can live with it. Now, one thing I did throw in, and we'll see why in a second, I wanted to see what a quote block looked like in this view. All right, so in the summary of the adventure phase, I threw in a quote block just to see what it's going to look like. And again, the CSS that's just governing what this looks like is completely built in. All right, I did not touch any of this. Any of you that go out and do this should see exactly the same thing. The reason I wanted to see the quote blocks is because when I'm actually writing the adventure, what I want at my fingertips, I mean, all of this stuff up here is nice, but once I get down to going, you know, whether it's in the summary section or in this plot point section, we can decide that. What I want to see is a block of notes that I need to know as a DM, and blocks of script that I want to read to the players. All right, that I've planned or thought about in advance, and anybody that's played a published module is going to be familiar with this format. All right, you have the little panel, built-in panels. You enter the room. All right, looking around, you see the altar, and the candles. You know, the candelabra on the altar. There are blood stains on the floor. You know, the kind of stuff the descriptive stuff. That you want to have. Maybe even some quotes or orations. There's a cleric at the altar, and he's speaking, and he's telling his people whatever. So all of that sort of stuff. I like to have that in blocks that I can read to the players. In between is where I like to have for example, my tactical combat notes. When the players attack the band of orcs, the orcs are going to approach the combat in this way. Reminders about where and when certain saving throws might be needed, where and when might certain situational or condition things come into play. Those are the things that I need to have at my fingertips while I'm running the adventure. So my big question was, and kind of still is, although I'm down to two choices, is how to, where to put those things. All right, and I've decided, at least for me, that where I'm going to put them is in the adventure phase version of the template. Alright, and they're either going to be, I haven't made the final decision, either in the section that ends up calling itself summary, although I might leave that blank, to be honest, or that might depend. Or if it's not going to be there, it's going to be, again, all of these things are the things that come in because I hit the adventure phase button. Or it's going to be down in the actual template, in the substructure scenes section. And what my personal plan is for building an adventure is at the adventure phase level. All right, there's only one substructure or scene, and it's the encounter that's going on. All right, so my encounters are going to be described in this text block. All right, I may or may not still keep all of the other bits, the themes and everything else. Again, just so that we don't end up with a cluttered, storyteller screen. I'll probably take all of those things out once I've used them. All right, because at this point, at this point, I'm building the actual artifact that's going to contain the adventure. The place they're going to stay, though, is in the adventure template that's the kind of the cover for the whole thing. Now, the other thing to point out is you can nest these more than 2 deep. So if you're planning a whole campaign, all right, that campaign is going to consist of a series of adventures. Each adventure is going to consist of a series of encounters. Oh, one other word before I forget it. When exploring, and looking at all of the different possibilities, I'm sure everybody else has noticed this too. You saw me open a plot and get these things. There's another wonderful thing here called encounters. Has anybody clicked that? Coming soon. So, hopefully, some of the, some of my my current dilemma will get resolved when encounters gets delivered. So clearly, Janet and Dimmy are working on it. In fact, if you watch the video that on how to use the storyteller screen, I think they mentioned that they're hoping to have encounters released before the end of the year. I don't know if that's still true. If there's anybody here from the Inner Sanctum that might know better, if that's still true. But in the meantime, I'm not going to wait. So anyway, if you're building a whole campaign, all right, you're going to break that campaign down into a series of adventures or adventure arcs, maybe. I mean, even there might be more than one level. You'll have a series of adventure arcs, and within that, that adventure arc might be 3 or 4 adventures, spanning several sessions, that involve, some important sub-point of your plot. Let's use a classic from ancient history, from the ancient history of D&D. Your campaign is focused around the Rod of Seven Parts. The Rod of Seven Parts was an artifact that was, this super powerful magic wand or staff thing that was, that was shattered into 7 pieces that were scattered around the multiverse or the world or the multiverse or whatever you want. And the campaign revolves around, for whatever reason, the party trying to hunt down all of those parts and put the rod back together. Okay? So there's your campaign. All right, you can describe the campaign. That's the goal. That's the objective. Put the rod back together. How are we going to do that? Well, first we have to find each of the 7 parts. So right off the bat, you've got 7 adventure arcs kind of predefined for you. All right, and each adventure arc is what has to happen in order to find the next part. Now, you might have them find the part in one adventure, or it might be multiple. All right, the first day's session might be just finding out who to ask to figure out where that part might be. All right, so the party might have to journey from wherever they are to some great library and spend time in the library and asking people and doing whatever, and maybe solving some puzzles and decoding some cryptic messages, or or even going off to some dungeon to find something, or some ancient ruin just to be able to read an inscription that might give them a hint as to where they need to go, and then in the next adventure they actually go, and maybe the second or third adventure they find they actually find the first part. So you've got, so you have your campaign, you have a adventure arc. Under that adventure arc, you have 2 or 3 adventures, and under those adventures, you have the specific encounters that make up those adventures. So you get to nest, your whole structure here, and you can manage it all right from here, so that you can always keep track of what's going on, what's been done and what hasn't been done. And as the sessions tick off, you can tick off, okay, they got that part, they're moving on to the next, and so forth. Question: how do you make sure that each part doesn't take too long? That's a good question, and it gets into the whole issue of specific, or generic adventure design, and that's going to be worth a whole nother could be a whole nother stream actually. There's a lot that goes into deciding, how big do you want your adventures to be, and some of it is game mechanic related, and some of it is just action flow related. You kind of also need to know your characters. How quickly do they go through a combat sequence? If you have a combat, if your characters are pretty comfortable with the rules and they can just flow through a combat, and okay, once they start combat, it'll be over in half an hour. You can then decide, well, if I'm building a 4-hour session, I can have 3 half-hour, even 4 half-hour combat pieces in there, and that still leaves us 2 hours of all the in-between stuff. If you have parties like one of mine that spend at least half the time at the table, catching up on every other real-world thing that's ever happened to them in the couple of weeks since they've seen each other last, then you either resign yourself to the point that it's going to take them more than one session to finish what should be a one-session adventure, or you build smaller adventures. Combat isn't the hard part for me. Moving social encounters is what bogs me. Yeah. One of the ways to keep social encounters moving, though, is and again, if that's your sticking point, it's where you want to focus some extra time. Half of the time, social encounters unfortunately bog down because we as DMs have to stop and think about how to do our part. All right, I'm sure we've all found this. The players know exactly how they're going to play their character in an interaction. All right, we're the ones that end up hemming and hawing and deciding: do I want to tell them this? Is that a secret? Are they supposed to know this? What am I, But I don't want to just sound like an idiot, So, especially if again, and this goes back to for example, I'm going to go. We walk into the village. I'm going to the temple to see the priest. Have planned in your head what kind of interaction the characters can have with the priest, and be able to just fire answers back at him. All right, you can't do that with every interaction, obviously, but you can do it with what should be the main ones. All right. The party's going to talk to the priest. The party's going to talk to the bartender. All right? Because these are the people, you're looking for somebody. Well, where do you look for people in role-playing in fantasy role-playing games? I'm going to go to the tavern and I'm going to ask around, and see if anybody has seen this guy. Well, make sure that you know what the bartender's going to answer, and make sure that you know what 2 or 3 of the patrons are going to answer. If you want to give it a hint there, make sure that there's a patron that's going to walk up, as you're asking the bartender. If you see the guy with the pink feather quill in his hat, another patron walks up and says, "Yeah, I've seen him," and you need to think about all of those things. How do I recommend navigating all of that? Navigating all of that is like sailing a ship through coral reefs at lowering tide. You can do your best to anticipate who they're going to talk to and why, and be prepared to deal with those conversations. But you're never going to get them all. The important thing for you to have at your fingertips is: what information do I want to give the party? What information do I, under no circumstances, want to give the Are there secrets that they absolutely can't learn? Are there things that they should learn? Are there things that they need to work a little harder to learn? And as long as you know what's there, what information you want to dole out. Hello, Aegon. Welcome. Thank you for the host, by the way. Nice. For the double host, that's right. Wherever Aegon goes, Roll Society follows. So, again, you have to try to anticipate. You'll never, and again, you'll never anticipate every move. All right, trust me. As soon as you find yourself where you've planned, the 3 or 4 people in town that the party is sure to ask. That's when the party is going to decide. I'm gonna just stand here and start asking random people in the street. All right, you'll never get it all. All right, don't try. Don't fret over it. All right, it's also okay for a lot of social conversations, especially in a situation like I'm describing. To just be you call out to the passerby. Hey, have you seen this guy? The passerby ignores you. The passerby glances at you quickly and looks the other way and continues to walk. All right, you can shut off the encounters sometimes too. Just know that if you're building into your encounter a situation where the party has to go into an area to gather information, they're going to gather information. Question, please keep this video. Yes, I actually will. After the mandatory 24-hour exclusivity period that Twitch requires of affiliates, I post all of these videos up to YouTube. I think my YouTube channel is flying by on the Moobot chats, but in case it's not, anybody and everybody is welcome to, at your leisure or now in a side tab, pop over to YouTube at that link. Don't forget to subscribe when you're there. Subscribes there don't cost you $5 like they do on Twitch. You're going to find a bunch of playlists there. I have a playlist for summer camp, and the 3 streams a week that I'm doing now are in 3 different categories, and each one of them has its own playlist. So right now, this is the first one of the adventure building. So right now you won't find any adventure building, but oh yeah, DM Stretch, yes. If you read the terms for Twitch, you are not allowed to post your stuff on any other social media for 24 hours. And that's why Janet even says, after her streams, she'll tell you that that they post their stuff up on like one day a week, like on Mondays or something. So yeah, you can't, I can't finish this and immediately export it to YouTube. It'll let you mechanically, it'll let you do it, but if Twitch sees it on YouTube, they're going to come after you. So you have to wait a day. Wait 24 hours from the end of the video. So tomorrow at noon I can download this. So sometime Friday, Saturday anyway. It'll certainly be there by Saturday as long as I don't forget. Yeah, they don't enforce it unless somebody's ratting you out. Yeah, it's easy enough to wait 24 hours. I mean, during that 24 hours, if anybody wants to see it, it's sitting on Twitch too. So it's not like it's disappeared. It'll be there as a past video on Twitch today, and actually it'll still be there for 2 weeks. I don't take them down. I let Twitch take them down, after the 2 weeks. But by then they're definitely over at YouTube. I think I actually did, because I kind of got lazy. I think I lost one of my summer camp streams from like the middle of the month. But other than that, all of my summer camp is there. Oh, by the way, I've also I went back and I scanned through them, and anybody whose articles I reviewed or showcased during my summer camp runs, if you look at the description of the video on YouTube, it doesn't list your names, but it lists the names of the articles that I reviewed or that I showcased. So if you're looking for a specific showcase, because I didn't bother clipping them or abbreviating them or shortening them. I mean, they're all 2-hour clips, but the reviews are in the order in which I did them. So if you're looking for a review that I may have done for one of your articles because you forgot or missed something that I said, go to YouTube and there they'll be. Barbarossa, hello Mr. Bob. I just got here, was wondering how many key NPCs do you plan for a settlement, a city, a major city, etc. It depends on the size of the settlement, of course. As far as key NPCs in any settlement, all right, there's usually at least 2, if not 3 or 4, and I'll go down them in order. All right, and this is starting with like a small hamlet. You got the innkeeper. All right, every small town has an inn. Every inn has an innkeeper, bartender, whatever you want to call it, whether he's the owner or whether he's the guy that's just there working every day, the guy behind the bar. All right, in most fantasy role-playing game situations, the guy behind the bar is the most important village NPC that you will ever have, and every town should have one. All right, why? Because the first stop that the players make when they go into a town to find out information is the tavern. So give the innkeeper a name. Next, if there is a church or a temple or a meeting house or any place where the people of the village may gather to worship, all right, is the cleric. Because the party members that don't rush to the tavern are going to run to the temple. All right, so those are two NPCs that, now if your village is really, really small, and this brings to mind a discussion that somebody had during summer camp about what the difference between a village and a hamlet was. And the definition of a hamlet is a village without a church. So if there isn't a church, then you can maybe get rid of maybe not define the cleric or the priest. All right, but if there's a church, then you want to at least have a little bit of information on who the priest is. Give him a name. Know which gods he favors. Now again, in a lot of our role-playing environments, we're all dealing with polytheistic religions. The priest doesn't necessarily have to be dedicated to one specific. And if you think about, in a rural setting where there's really only one priest available for the whole village, he needs to be able to handle the whole pantheon, maybe. And not just be specific to one god in a polytheistic pantheon. These aren't the high priests. These aren't the keepers of the main temples. These are the out on the street priests. So important NPC number 3 would be and this one gets a little variable. Whether you call him the mayor, the town elder, and maybe there's more than one. The guy who knows everything about the town, whose job it is to know about the town and kind of be responsible for the town. All right, because he's the third stop. Coffee, have a good sleep. Thank you for stopping by. And the fourth would be, and this again depends on the size, if there is anybody responsible for law enforcement in the town. You probably want to define that one as well. It could be a sheriff, could be, again, as the settlements get larger, these things, you certainly don't have to define an NPC for every member of the city watch. Every member of the city guard in a city that has 150,000 people in it, because there's probably going to be a few hundred of them, if not more. But you'll want to know the captain of the guard, or at least the leader of the guard. Again, you need to think like a player. if I'm going into a town looking for information, who am I going to ask? Right? And those are the characters you want to kind of have ready. All right. Like I said, I can guarantee you, though, the innkeeper and the cleric and the priest, those are the top two in every game I've ever seen, in every world I've ever seen. At least those that are Dungeons and Dragons like. Your mileage may vary if you're playing a space-based game. Although I can tell you, if you're playing Star Wars, innkeeper is still number one. He's the guy behind the bar in the cantina, but he's still number one. All right. Every town, every settlement has one, and he's the first guy everyone goes to. Yeah, Aegon says not necessarily a town could be devoted to one god. That's true. I mean, if there's some underlying reason for it to be one out of a pantheon, then yes, the cleric can be devoted to that. So that's something that you'll have to answer based on your own religious setup in your world. It might be illegal to worship the other the other 12 gods in the pantheon, or it might be frowned upon. Now, even there, though, if it's not illegal, all right, you might have to be prepared to this, and this. Now we start getting into the the grayer area. If I'm going to just use Norse as an example. All right, if you have a paladin devoted to Thor, and you walk into a town that's devoted to Freya, and the priest or priestess is only deals with Freya, what does the paladin do? Does he have nowhere to go? Maybe. Or does he have to go find the old man who lives at the end of the road, who happens to be, the authority on Thor in the town? All right. And that brings us, by the way, to the last of the NPCs in a town. Obviously, if the players are going into a town to look for somebody in particular, like a sage, then clearly you need to define the sage. But I don't consider that as the random. What random NPCs do you need to define in a generic town? Obviously, if there's a targeted NPC, that needs to exist. Now, in addition to those standard ones, as I mentioned, depending on the size of the town, you might want to write down a few lines and not more than a few lines for a few others, like a couple of patrons in the tavern. They certainly don't need stat blocks, unless one of them plans on starting a bar fight, in which case you might want to have a stat block for one. But again, just to be prepared to add a little color and flavor. You might have a line or two about some of the other patrons in the bar, or the dock workers. When you're going to look for the, if you're specifically looking for the captain of a boat, or of a ship, you might have a few little flavor guys, here and there, but that's going to be situation specific too. So where were we? Let's see. We're an hour and a half into this. I was actually going to start writing, start putting something together here for an adventure that I am working on, just to see how these pieces go together. But we're actually having a lot of fun. How do I create Starbucks for random NPC? I assume you mean stat blocks. I did say stat blocks and not Starbucks, didn't I? Yeah, stat blocks. Part of that is going to be game specific. I will tell you, Pathfinder actually treats it very, very nicely, and unfortunately, oh, Songbird's on the phone, and this is her question. So I'm going to wait to answer that till she says she's back. What else do we have here? We'll go around it. You keep generic race stats with room to tally up more than one if needed. Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back to the whole issue of in addition to the name, the bunch of random names, you can also, if you want to really be prepared, put together a list of random descriptions. Old, old guy with weathered hat, and smoking a pipe, just little things like that. Songbird, not on the phone call. On phone, and it did autocorrect. Thanks for being so responsive. So, are you available to hear the answer to your question now, Songbird, or not? If not, we'll wait. And we'll work around it. So yeah, I mean, if you have the time and opportunity, put together those little lists, and it kind of goes back to some of the things. We saw that the sight smells whatever. It's the same idea, having a few phrases, and there are tools out there. Somebody had one last night that'll do a quick NPC description, just randomly generate one. So going to a site, that'll do that, and I don't recall, and if anybody out there remembers the site, please pop the link up. The more of those little things, or it was Donjon, right? Which is the same people, by the way, as Fantasy Name Generator. The more of those things you have at your fingertips, the faster you can respond to those random situations, again, where you run into a character and the players want to know more about them. Or you want to, again, the more color you can put into your descriptions at all times, the more your players will be encouraged to put color into their descriptions. All right, this is another quick general note. All right, if you don't want your players to describe their actions during combat as, I rolled a dice, 14, I hit, here's the damage. All right, if you want that to be, after the dice roll, and whether it's a hit or not, or you as a DM could do it too, but you swing your sword and blood splashes up from the wound as if you want to put that kind of color in your game, you need to be prepared you need to do it before your players will do it. All right, they're going to take their cue from you. So if a social conversation, I walk up to this guy and ask him a question, what does he look like? Or if it's just, well, he says he doesn't know. All right, you're not going to get a lot of color or flavor out of that. But if it's, you see an old gentleman sitting at a table all alone in the tavern. He's got a large floppy hat that looks like it's, seen better days. He's smoking a pipe. His clothes are worn and tattered or whatever. The more description you put into the encounter, the more description the players are going to respond with, all right? Because they're following your cue. So anyway, stat blocks. The biggest piece of advice, and this is another, again, World Anvil issue. I don't know what the NPC stat blocks look like for D&D in World Anvil. I haven't looked at them yet. But in Pathfinder, I do know that they currently haven't finished all of the stat blocks, and they do not have an NPC stat block. The general rule for building an NPC, though, is do not waste your time building an entire character sheet for an NPC, especially that's an NPC that's going to exist long enough to answer 3 questions in 10 minutes, and that's the last time you're going to see them. All right, your time is far too valuable to spend filling out 5 pages of character sheet, all right, with information that is never, ever, ever going to come into play in the game. In Pathfinder, I'll give you the Pathfinder bits again because I know what the stat blocks are supposed to look like. For Pathfinder, you don't even bother creating the attribute scores for an NPC. You just create the attribute pluses. All right. I don't care if he's a 17 or 18. Both of those are +4, and that's all I want to know about. All right. He's +4 because he's not advancing. He's not moving up. Now, if it's an NPC that's going to be persistent, and that is going to play a major role in the campaign, then maybe you want to create a full character sheet for him and track him. But if you have more than 3 of those in your campaign, you probably have too many. All right, and that's in your entire campaign. The NPCs, though, again, what are they there for? How are you dealing with them? All right, is he there to start a bar fight? Then you need to know his athletic ability and maybe his acrobatic ability. You don't need to know if he can craft things. So you don't even bother with a crafting score. Is he there to answer questions? Is he the village sage? He's there to answer questions then. All right, now he doesn't need to have thievery and he doesn't need to have acrobatics or athletics, but he needs to have a nature and an arcana and an occultism. He needs to have the knowledge skills, and he might need to have some specific lore skills as well. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Something is glitching and twitching. Hopefully it will stop. And I'm assuming that I'm still broadcasting, so it's amazing how this just happens all on its own. Something started up. I can see my CPU popping. Oh, that's right, it's Thursday. This happens every Thursday at this time. Oh, here we go. Let's see if it goes away, and if it doesn't, I learned last time how to fix it. I can deal with this quickly if I have to. But in the meantime, I'm assuming I'm still there. Am I still there? Are you still respond? Can somebody type something in the chat so I can see if my chat updates? Because if not, I need to restart it. Not seeing anything yet. Okay. All right, folks. Tell you what. I've been at this for an hour and a half. If anybody wants to take a quick bio break, it's going to take me a few minutes to bounce these. Oh, look at that! Everything just jumped back in. I just add a name. You have a ton of them because I have recurring players that are involved. So even recurring players, though, you need, for an NPC, you need to ask yourself, what is their purpose? All right, and you need to define whatever statistics they need to satisfy their purpose. But you want to try to limit yourself to those. First of all, it also means, when the encounter with the NPC happens, you're not fumbling with the 5-page character sheet to find out what statistic you need. All right, the stat block should have at its fingertips the 2 or 3 skills, the saving throws, your basic stuff. What saving throw numbers does he have? Again, it's just a single number. What pluses? What do you add? What are you going to add to the D20 to give him for a saving roll? You don't care whether it came from his, this much of it is because of his dex, and this much of it is because of his armor, and this much, create simple numbers because the NPC is there to serve a specific purpose. And by the way, I'm gonna play with getting this thing recovered. I might have to restart my browser. Yes, I'm gonna have to restart my browser. Um, but again, I'm assuming that everybody is still hearing me. I am not seeing a chat right now. As you guys will notice, I'm not seeing much of anything right now. I don't know where Firefox just went to, but I'm going to restart Firefox in a second. And that should make this go away. So anyway, the answer to NPC stat blocks, they should look very much like monster stat blocks. All right. You know, you have minimal information needed to run the character in the situations that he's there for. Now, at the moment, as I said, in World Anvil, we don't have an NPC stat block yet for Pathfinder. I'm not sure if there is one for Dungeons and Dragons or for 5e. If there is, great. What is this doing? I need to kill the old one and restart it, and then it'll be fine. In the meantime, everybody gets to look in the infinity window of OBS. Okay, come on. It's trying to die. You know what worries me? There was one of those. Come on, die. I need you to die. I had one of those wonderful not responding windows, but I think it's behind here. Oh, this is waking up. This is trying. It's trying. Struggling. If I can make this go away quick enough, by the way, everybody will get to see my puppy tax. A script on this page. Let's stop the script because I'm going to restart this anyway. Okay, now is it going to let me delete this window? Hiding behind this window is a picture of my puppy. Come on, everybody wants to see the puppy. Oh, come on. It's still playing catch up. Sooner or later, it'll get to the point where it figures out that I want it to close. Let's see, can I close individual windows? Is it just ignoring me entirely? Can I move the window? Yes, I can move the window. There's my puppy, leaping into the air and catching a tennis ball. Alright, if it lets me move it, it should let me delete it. Why aren't you letting me delete it? Like I said, everybody take a quick bio break. There's what we're looking for. Had to wait for that to pop up so I could tell it to kill it. Okay, and there's the puppy. Yay, puppy. Now we have to give Firefox a few seconds to finish shutting down. And then we try to bring it up again. That could be part of the problem. I forgot to do this today. That was strange. Oh, come on. My CPU's not overtaxed. This has got to be a memory issue. In the meantime, I'm also trying to make sure that Google Drive Sync isn't part of the problem here. I usually shut this off before I start streaming, and I forgot to. Oh, I see we're not getting music right now either. I'm also beginning to wonder if Pretzel Rock isn't part of my problem. Am I still being... Yeah, okay. My audio is working, but I notice Pretzel Rock is not running right now, or it's not broadcasting anything. And I'm twitching and frame dropping now, too, so... Trying to hang in there. Oh, this one's being nasty. Now my mouse isn't going. OBS says I'm live, so I assume I'm live. I think it's time to go to the emergency phone chat so I can see if you guys are seeing anything at all here. Of course, I can't watch myself on... I can't watch myself on the phone. Oh no. So I can't even do that. Yeah, something is running or jamming up in the background. And I don't know what. Who hates technology? Let me get that out of the way again. Okay, got Pretzel Rock to go away. That's a good start. And things look like they're starting to behave now. So let's see if we can get back up and running. Okay, just trying to get my browser up now. My apologies for no further music. And I'm sure you folks are all having lots of fun in the chat while watching me struggle here. Where is my Firefox? This is going to come up like 2 or 3 times now because I don't want to hit it anymore. There we go. Now we're starting to wake up. And as usual, it's trying to come up in recovery mode, which at least saves me the trouble of opening up 14 tabs again. But let's see what it looks like when it gets back. All right, that's behaving. Now all we need is our chat. Welcome to the chat room. There we go. Is there anybody still out there? Okay, is there anybody still here? Or do you all give up and go away? There we go. I see a hello from E Songbird, finally. Okay, it looks like we're back. I just need to fix that resize. That's interesting. Yes, thank you all for putting up with this. This is still not completely back because it's not resizing. I'm not sure what's going on there. But we're going to live with that because we're having fun dealing with just the chat pretty much anyway. So anyway, welcome back to chat. Yes, thank you. It's good to be back. We're still here in chat, having fun chatting and supporting you. Thank you, Songbird. Coffee, Dazzlecat, Aegon, Coffee, Dazzlecat, Makara Chandra. Would know we're dead. Coffee Thills thinks of to-do list. Yeah, dead. Moondare. Those of you who I didn't say hello to when you came in, by the way, hello. Yeah, the good thing is we're all streamers, so we've all been there before. It's true. I definitely need to get my new system up and running, if only to have two screens working on some of this stuff. I have a feeling that that problem is Pretzel Rock, and I'll tell you why. Because the last couple of times I've had similar problems, I've been able to get the browsers restarted and limp through the last of the session. But then when I'm cleaning up after my stream is over, I go to shut off Pretzel Rock, and it's taking like 5 minutes to shut down. So I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of nasty memory leak in the Pretzel Rock software, that's eventually causing these problems. And like after like 2.5 hours, it the my poor system finally says it's had enough. You know, having another 24 gig of memory in the machine probably wouldn't hurt, but coffee. I'm planning on how best to own the list. uh, so anyway, where were we? What were we discussing? The last question I remember was, important NPCs to. Oh no, it was yeah, how to do stat. What should be in a stat block? So yeah, the short answer is whether it's a monster, an NPC, pretty much anything. Um, what needs to be in this what should be in the stat block is what needs to be in the stat block, and not much else. If it's an NPC, you might want to put a little descriptive, again, quick description of what he looks like so that you have it at your fingertips. Um, Anticipate what kind of interactions he's going to have with the party, and make sure that he has the skills needed to do that. If you're talking to the guy who's selling snake oil out of his wagon on the back, he needs to have deception and performance scores. All right, and maybe even thievery. Um, he doesn't need to have survival. All right, because you're encountering him in a town. So what a wilderness stat doesn't mean anything. Um, and again, don't focus on what his attribute scores are. Don't bother building them up. Think about when you're building the NPC too. Think about really what's he there for? All right, is this guy a sage? If this guy's a sage, all right, you don't need to go through creating. He's a human, so this is his base intelligence, and then because he was this, he gets another two, and then he was he's the town sage. He's got an 18 intelligence. He's got a +4. All right, you're done. That's that. You don't have to roll numbers for every NPC. All right, NPCs should be designed for what they need to function as. All right, redeem hydrates, posture check. Yeah, I could use a posture check. I'm slumping. How's that? That better? Yeah, unless we're sprinting, tunes are good. Yeah, tunes are definitely good then. I need to either work on that. I could also take Plan B, and that is to bring up YouTube and run. I have ready to go Danheim YouTube, but I didn't want to necessarily go with Viking death music today. But that's Plan B, or look for an alternative to Pretzel. Or again, once I finally get my new system, if more memory solves the problem or at least delays the problem, I don't care if this happens 4 hours into a 3 hour stream. All right, the problem is when it happens 2 hours into a 3 hour stream, uh, or an hour and a half into a 3 hour stream. Um, Dazzlick had choice between hearing Bob clickety clack or or tunes and Frozen Bob. Yeah. I'll deal with that. I will continue to research what the problem is, perhaps, and see about it. Dazzly Cat has to go back to work. Enjoy. So, any other questions about my strategy on adventure building and yeah, actually, yeah, let's start getting into general adventure building. I was going to start doing. I was going to dedicate a whole stream to this, and I still might. But um, one of the things I really liked, one of the many things I really liked about the Pathfinder 2 specifically system, is they they laid out a very, very practical approach to creating encounters and figuring out what should be in an encounter and what shouldn't be in an encounter. So I'm going to try to genericize this a little bit, or as much as possible, because I know there's people out there, Songbird, doing 5e, not just Pathfinder. Um, but the first general questions you want to ask yourself, the very first question is, how quickly do you want your characters to advance in level? All right. Pathfinder suggests 3 adventure sets, maybe 4, maybe 2, um, per level, and it should kind of depend on how often your party meets or your player group meets. If you're meeting every week, then and you plan on playing for a long time, and you're not just doing one off. So Barbarossa's ready for this, yeah. Gets popcorn, soda, candy bars. Okay. Um, if you plan on running a campaign for any length of time, let's assume by starting that you start by assuming that you're playing once a week. Um, 3 or 4 adventure arcs, and when I say 3 or 4 adventures, and when I say adventures, I mean they might be whole sessions. This also gets into, though, not only how often do you meet, but how long do you meet for? Um, for just to help standardize things, when I talk about an adventure, I'm probably talking about approximately 4 hours of play. So, and that's assuming that you don't get too distracted with the hellos and how are yous and how are the kids and all that kind of stuff. But so in 4 hours, you should be able to get through an adventure that consists of 3, maybe 4 encounters, depending. Maybe a quick, three real encounters and maybe a quick side random encounter or something like that. Maybe 2, maybe 4. Call it 3. Um, if you're meeting once a week and you have 3 or 4 of those, then between advancing from level, whether it's level 1 to level 2 or level 12 to level 13, you probably want your characters to level fairly uniformly. All right. So if your first question, if you want to ask yourself, how quickly do I want them to level, think about how long you want the campaign to run. All right. I was very, very fortunate. The campaign that I was running before I started building Cartyrion, in my last homebrew world. That campaign lasted 7 years. Now, we weren't meeting every week. We were meeting approximately once a month. So, you can take that into account. But a 7-year campaign is a rarity, simply because, especially if you're meeting weekly, because if the characters aren't advancing fast enough, they're going to get bored and go away. And if the characters advance to max, you're going to run out of things to do with them, and they're going to get bored and go away. So campaigns have a have a definite lifetime. So let's be creative here, and let's say you're going to run your characters from level 1 to level 20 in a campaign. You're going to build the whole campaign arc, even if you don't have the whole arc in your mind yet. You want to run them from 1 to 20. All right, and you want to take about 2 years to do that. That's probably reasonable, and you're going to meet once a week. All right, so what does that tell you? Well, if you want it to be over in 2 years and you're going to meet once a week, you're going to have 100 sessions. All right, to go 20 levels. All right, well, a little under 100 sessions. So you could go 4, maybe even 5 adventures then per level. You generally don't want to go more than 4 though, so 3 or 4. Once you know that, you now know how much experience the players need to gather in a given adventure. Now, Pathfinder makes it easy because unlike D&D, where the adventure where experience is kind of exponential. It takes 1,000 or 2,000 points to go from level 1 to level 2, but it takes 40,000 to go from level 10 to level 11. Pathfinder kind of simplifies that. In Pathfinder, it's 1,000 points per level, but that's because monsters don't have fixed experience point values. They have the experience you gain from defeating something is a function of its level compared to yours. So that I don't want to get into those details, but the important thing is, again, where your party is. So you know where your party is. You know what their experience point break looks like. If you want to do 3 adventures per level, divide that experience point gap by 3. That's how many experience points each player needs to earn in your adventure. All right. Once you know that, now you can figure out what combination of monsters and traps and treasure, whatever it is that awards experience, and it could be also just be objective awards, milestone awards, but how much experience you need to give out in the adventure. That will help you determine what kind of creatures or what kind of monsters or obstacles to put in your party's way over the course of the whole adventure. And then the question becomes, how do you break them up? Or you can actually take that the other way. You want your adventure to consist of 3 combat encounters, let's say. And again, this might be 2, it might be 4. A particular adventure might have very little combat and be more focused on puzzle solving. But let's just keep it simple and say you're going to do a three combat adventure. All right. The adventure needs to be 1/3 of the experience point total. So I got my 3 combats. For variety, you generally don't want the 3 combats to be equal. You probably want the first one to be easy. You want the second one to be harder, and you want the third one to be the one that makes them wonder whether they're going to survive. Whatever rule system you're working with should give you guidance as to how strong, again, and I know Pathfinder does this very well. Pathfinder tells you on a per encounter basis, if you devote this much of your experience budget to a single encounter, that's going to make the encounter, either moderate difficulty or an extreme challenge, or if you do that much, you're looking at a total party wipeout. So so you need to, again, that's going to be dependent on your rules, but you want to think of it that way. So once you've done that, now you know what kind of you know what the value of the obstacles in your party's way need to be. And then once you've done that, now it's just a matter of arranging them and putting all the color text and identifying the locations and drawing the maps and pulling in the stat blocks for the specific monsters, and so forth. But that's the approach you need to take. All right, you do need to think of adventure building from a mechanic standpoint as well as from a story standpoint. All right, and the mechanic standpoint is it's all about survivability and advancement. All right, and pace, and we're talking about campaign pace here as well as adventure pace. So so anyway, the adventure that that I wanted to build, I'm starting. Um, Cartyrion is a brand new world, and my first couple of adventures are intended to introduce the players to the new world, and because none of them have played Pathfinder 2 before, they're also to introduce the players to the new rule set, to getting familiar with working in Pathfinder. Clearly, those things have nothing to do with a long-term campaign, but that's okay. It's at least at lower level, all right? And in fact, it's something you might want to consider, especially in a homebrew world. It might be worth an adventure or two that do nothing more than familiarize your players with how your world works and looks and feels. Now I'm working on my second adventure in Cartyrion right now. The first one was devoted to game mechanics. Now that doesn't mean you don't make it exciting and fun, but so the first one was devoted to game mechanics and simple ones like combat, but not just combat, also how to deal with conditions, and afflictions and how those things work. Those of you who heard the short story that Sable read of mine yesterday, the character in that short story was the first encounter of my party of my first adventure. All right, so the short story was the telling of tale from the standpoint of the monster, but that ghoul was the first thing my players ever killed on Cartyrion. Um, so he was the first casualty. That's where he came from. All right, and that's I had in my mind, because this is again the whole thing. How did he get there? And this was part of my telling the story. All right, the encounter that I built was the players. Again, they're all new first level characters. Yes, it's a trope. Yes, it's used over and over and over again, and yes, people laugh at you when you use it. But the reality is, it's a good working trope, and I am not beyond using things that work well. The characters all met at the inn. All right. The Bugbear's Head Inn is an inn on a road that runs through a forest. It is at least a week from the nearest town. All right. If you think about it, if you think about travel in day, again, this is pre-industrial, early middle age kind of fantasy, setting. All right, where whether you're on foot or even on horseback, you average about 20 miles a day, to travel, and if the towns are 200 miles apart or 100 miles apart, 100 miles apart is it takes a week to get from town one to town two. If they're 200 miles apart, it takes 2 weeks. Well, if you're walking, whether you're walking or riding, what do you have to do at the end of every one of those days? You are either making camp along the side of the road, or, and this happened in real history, or inns start popping up at about those 20-mile points. All right, there's, because again, if there's traffic from A to B, and that traffic all stops at about the same point every night, somebody's going to say, if I build an inn here, I'm going to make some money. All right, so the Bugbear's Head Inn is just about midway between two towns that are about 2 to 3 weeks apart. Um, it's a decent sized inn. It's even got the innkeeper even built a few additional like small cabin kind of structures behind the inn to accommodate either large parties or long-standing parties. Um, Across the road from the inn itself, friends of his that helped him build the inn. It's a human innkeeper and his wife. They were both mercenaries before they retired to run this inn. He's a fighter, she's a ranger. Um, they have a friend who is a fighter but also a blacksmith. He's a dwarf, of course, because we got to have our dwarven blacksmith. He's actually set up a smithy shop right across the road with his house. Um, and another friend that was part of the group, that was originally part of the same mercenary band. I have a gnomish guy and his gnomish wife. He likes to build interesting, funny machines, so he's actually built a water wheel powered grain mill. All right, and the farmers from now the farmers are still at least a couple days up and down the road, the nearest farmers, but they bring their grain, for him to grind. And his wife, who is an alchemist, not only she's also, well, she's an alchemist, but she's also the brewmaster. And she makes, she takes some of those grain products and she produces ales and spirits from the grain, and they get sold. They get sold at the inn. So the inn is kind of self-sufficient. There's little farm patches behind the inn to grow, the kind of veggies, and like I said, the wife of the owner, or well, the co-owner, is a ranger. She goes out hunting, so she gets meat on the table and all that kind of good stuff. My intention was that the inn is a home base for the adventurers for at least the first two levels, for levels 1 and 2. So they're going to be here for like 6 or 7 adventure arcs. The NPCs were designed to be resources, but not combat assistance. All right, the NPCs, they are higher level, but they never come to the rescue of the PCs. They're there to provide simple services because there isn't a town. Um, the innkeeper, again, because they are an inn on a long forest road, he keeps certain basic supplies. So if the party runs out of rope or candles or things like that, they can buy them from the innkeeper. If they need repair work done on a weapon or armor or something, or maybe even buy a piece of simple armor, the smith will be able to handle that for them. If they need to pick up a few healing elixirs or that sort of thing, the alchemist is there to provide that service. So there was a thought process behind putting all of these things together, but they're there. So anyway, the first adventure is they're all meeting at the inn, and while they're learning about all of the people, the regulars at the inn, the first day or the first night, this guy comes in. He kind of brushes right by them. He looks a little beat up, but he doesn't stick around long enough for them to get a good look at him. He runs over. He's talking to the innkeeper. They duck out the back. The innkeeper comes back, says a few words about how he was all beat up and scratched up. Talks to the halfling woman who works his kitchen, who had brought him a meal, and they both say, yeah, he looked pretty bad. We'll check on him in the morning, and maybe we'll get our healer alchemist to take a good look at him. Well, of course, he turns up dead in the morning, so basically they don't know who he is or where he's from or whatever, but this has happened before. Again, This is an inn in the middle of nowhere on a forest road. This isn't the first time they've either had somebody, that either came in practically dead, or somebody else on the road might have found somebody and brought them. So they have a little burial plot out back. So they take them and they dig a hole and they stick him in the ground and they put up a little marker with just a date on it because they don't even know his name. Um, and because, of course, he was killed by a ghoul, he wakes up the next night, or that night at midnight, digs his way out, and the first thing he does is heads for the little halfling house. That's the halfling, the cook and her husband kind of tends the kitchen gardens basically for the inn, and they have a couple of kids. So the ghoul is trying to beat all them up. Somebody comes running into the inn. There's a horrible monster outside. Help! 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 Um, so and this is at night. Actually the common room is shut down. The owner of the inn has gone off on a business trip. The the owner's wife, is off hunting somewhere. The dwarf is the guy who's kind of in charge right now, but he went back home for the night because everybody left the common room. So it's up to the adventurers, of course, to leap up and run out and see what all the ruckus is about. And because they were sleeping, they didn't have all their armor on, but they run out and they find this thing, and they did grab their weapons, of course, and they kill it and they deal with it. And then in the aftermath of that, that night and the next morning. Oh, by the way, after the fight is over, the dwarf comes running up, still trying to strap on his armor. So he gets there at the end, but he deliberately is there to miss it. Then they quickly realize, well, if this guy turned into a ghoul, it's because he was attacked by a ghoul. So there's got to be another one out there somewhere, and this is not a good thing. So they go to his cabin and they rummage through his things and they find out he had a notebook, and they see references to the fact that he was doing something at this farm just up the road. And of course, the dwarf knows who those farmers are, and they're a great family and all this good stuff. This is terrible. This is horrible. I can't go, though, because I'm watching the inn because the other ones are all gone. So, party, can you go and deal with this? So, of course, the party goes off and deals with it. And the adventure then has, they unfortunately, come across a good mix of zombies and ghouls because if you recall, even in the story I mentioned, he at the end the bad guy, he raised two zombies, turned one of them into a ghoul, and then had to get out of there. But that means when he left a zombie and a ghoul, both of whom were capable of creating more of their kind. Um, and you get to hear a little more of the backstory, what was going on, why were the two young people who were dead, who were injured and killed, what happened to them. Well, the house was doing, they were doing a barn raising. There was a horrible accident. The farmer's two sons were caught under a collapse and died. That kind of broke up the work. Well, it wasn't just the farmer's family though. He had also, because he was raising a barn, had help coming in from the town or from other farmers. So there were a whole bunch of people there. So by the time the party got there were a good, scattered over the three encounters that they had, there were a good dozen mix of ghouls and zombies for them to deal with over three different encounters. So that was, again, the thought process that went into my story behind the whole adventure arc, how it was broken up. And as far as it was breaking up, that first encounter was relatively simple. It introduced the ghoul, though. It introduced, okay, there's a ghoul, and where there's one, there's more than one. So going back to some of those elements we looked at before, we understand the hooks and the hook and the threat. It's there's a ghoul out there, and there's more out there. So you're going to need to do something else besides even just dealing with this one bad guy. Um, some extra flavor was added in. The dwarf knows the family. This is important. This is, we can't just let it go, but I can't do anything about it, so I need to rely on you. Now obviously the party was, my player groups were happy to jump up there. They understand how this works. But there was enough ammunition available to me to have to make a case if they balked at it. Um, when they got up there, their first encounter was in the farmhouse. Um, that one was a relatively easy one also, and in fact didn't involve any ghouls. It was just a couple of zombies. It was the wives of the some of the workers that were feasting on one of the other dead people. So that one was a relatively easy one, but that also gave them an opportunity to now take control of the house and have a place to hole up if they needed it, if things started to go south in the last few adventures, in the last few encounters. Then there was an encounter on the forest path on the way to the family grave plot, and then of course the final encounter was was in the family grave plot, and that one featured several zombies and the ghouls who were lurking at the edge of the woods so that they could try to sneak attack. So that was the general layout. What it taught the party members, again from a mechanic standpoint, or from learning the new game mechanics, is we had plenty of opportunity to do basic combat, but we also had opportunity to deal with the how do you work the paralysis effect that a goblin or that a ghoul bite or slash can give, and how do you deal with the potential of infection, of the ghoul fever or the zombie rot, that could cause you to turn into one of those. So that was my learning objectives for that set of missions. My next encounter, or my next adventure rather, is going to focus on more of the environment. All right, they're in the Feywood. The Feywood is named that because there's lots of Fey. So in Adventure 2, they're going to be introduced to a variety of the Fey life, just so they begin to realize what it is that lives in this wood, in this forest. And in a nutshell, here's the way the second adventure pans out. There's not as much combat in the second adventure. There's some. Um, because there was so little planned combat, let me start at the beginning. They find out when the owner of the inn comes back. Um, he comes back with the mention that he had stopped by so and so's farm on the way back, and the farmer was despondent because apparently somebody or something had stolen all of his metal tools. All right, and it's planting time. He needs to get going, and now he has no tools to do his work. And he's looking for help to help him find his tools. So, that's the beginning of the hook to the adventure. Just to add to it, he also mentions his wife is convinced that, that some of the nastier Fey creatures stole the tools. If not, there's certainly some other thief out there. So there's enough to get the party involved or interested in it. So anyway, they get down there and they find out the farmer had been clearing a field. He's a new farmer in the area. He'd been clearing a field, was chopping down a lot of trees, and he got to this really, really, really big oak tree. And it was the last one he had to cut down to have a nice clear field. But it was evening, so he just, he left the axe stuck in the tree to, so that it would be there for him early in the morning, and he went off to bed. And when he came back, the axe was gone. And then when he went looking to see if maybe he just misremembered and put the axe away, he found out all his other tools were gone. Well, surprise, surprise, this is a forest full of Fey creatures. What lives in a great big oak tree? A dryad. The dryad who kind of liked the family and the farmer, and although he had been clearing a lot of trees, the Fey are resigned to the fact that humans are moving in and setting up farms. So as long as you don't chop down my tree, all right, and as long as you're just cutting down trees to grow other grain and crops, then at least you're still growing stuff out of the ground, and that's a good thing. But she didn't know how to deal with the fact that this guy was going to chop down her tree. So she found her little brownie friends, and brownies are little tiny Fey creatures who are pretty simple and happy and like to play games. So she decided to tell the brownies, we're going to play a game with the farmer. It's called hide the axe. So she gives the axe to the brownies who are supposed to just hide it. At least until she can resolve the situation. Um, well, the brownies get carried away and they decide if hide the axe is fun, then hide the hammer and hide the saw and hide the plow blade and hide the everything else would be even more fun. So the brownies gather up every metal tool they can find and they hide them. And then the brownies decide, well, we really need to hide them real good so that the farmer, so that this game lasts a while. So instead of just hiding them in their little hole, which is actually underneath the farmhouse, um, they take all the tools to the local leprechaun. All right, so now we're introducing a third fey creature, and ask the leprechaun to hide the tools for him. And they explain they're playing this game. Well, the leprechaun is up for mischief anytime, so the leprechaun takes the tools. So the party gets there. The party quickly discovers that this tree has some aura of magic. They quickly end up talking to the dryad. The dryad explains he was going to chop down my tree. I couldn't let that happen. I didn't want to hurt him, though. I didn't want to do anything else. So I gave the axe to the brownies and they hid it. Okay, now we got to find the brownies. So the party has to rummage around the house. They finally find where the brownies are. They entice them out with sweets and candy. And they talk to the brownies, and the brownies say, oh, yeah, we took that, and we took all the other tools, too, because we're playing this game. But we don't have them now. We gave them to the leprechaun to hide so that we could play some more. So now the party has to go find the leprechaun. The leprechaun says, oh, yeah, I know where the tools are. I'm not going to do the accent now that I have to do for them. But, yeah, oh, yeah, I can help you out. I can give you what you want. No problem. But, you're going to have to give me something first. And I don't want anything complicated. It's been a long time since I had a nice fried egg for breakfast. So I need you to get me an egg. And I'll even tell you where. Over there's a clearing off in that direction. All right, and there's a big chicken that lives in that clearing. And all you need to do is bring me one of those eggs, and I can help you out. Well, the big chicken is a cockatrice. So they have to fight the creature that can petrify them. When they eventually finish defeating the creature, they have to find its nest. And then they find an egg, and then they bring it back to the leprechaun. And that's when the leprechaun tells them, well, yeah, I had the tools, but a bunch of gremlins stole them from me. So the leprechaun tells the party then where to find the gremlins. And the gremlin combat is a real combat, because gremlins are nasty, evil things and deserve to die. And there's a couple of different flavors of gremlins. So again, when I'm building this, I have to scale up in size my gremlins and the count of them to make the combats interesting. I have the cockatrice fight itself is a combat. I threw in just again to get something up early. I threw in a quote unquote random encounter with the bugbear who are known to live in the woods. So there was a bugbear fight on the road while they were on their way to the farmer. The only thing that I actually left random on that was what watch during the night it attacked, which determined who was on watch and how alert they were and whether they were able to detect it. And the bugbear was there to rob them, not to kill them. So, but they saw, the first party, I have 3 play groups going. One of them has played through the first part of this so far. They did finally see the bugbear coming. The bugbear's an easy fight, so that one was over quick. It was 1-round fight. But it gets some rolling dice, and that's what, you want to do that early too if you can. And then they had to go through the whole rigmarole of discover the dryad, discover the brownies, discover the leprechaun, all of that to lead them to the cockatrice fight. So so we have the cockatrice fight, and then they're going to come back from that and find out that they're not going to get, that false ending thing that we were talking about there before. where the party thinks they're done, but they find out they're not done. Well, they're going to defeat the cockatrice, come back to the leprechaun, expecting to gather up all the tools and go back to the farmer triumphant. But no, they're going to find out, well, no, I didn't say I'd give you the tools. I said I'd help you, is what the leprechaun is going to say to him. I said I'd help you out, and I will help you out. All your tools were stolen by these gremlins that live over there. So um, so then they're going to have to go and again deal with the gremlins and the gremlin fight. Like I said, they're going to have to go into the caves where the gremlins live, and then they're going to have to deal with them all, and that'll be a standard combat, and that will be the final resolution. And then they'll find the tools, and they bring them back to the farmer, and everybody's happy that the dryad and the farmer make friends, and now the farmer knows the brownies live down below their house, and that's okay because they're good luck, and they can watch out for the little kids, and they can do all kinds of good stuff, and everybody's happy, and everybody lives happily ever after. So that's the adventure that I was going to start actually writing into bits and pieces here today. At this point, I'm not going to start because I know I still have about 25 minutes to go, but I think I'd have more. We're doing better answering lots of questions. So we will continue doing that. Micarachondra, yes, sounds like a cockatrice. Yes, it definitely was. Songbird wants to know, so when is the ASC going to getting to play that adventure? Well, now that you know all about the adventure, you can't play that one. I'll have to set up. I'll have to save some other ones for you guys. I will, by the way, be looking for additional play groups. Like I said, I've got 3 play groups, and what I've been planning on doing is, as I put together an adventure, I run it through those 3, and after those 3 adventures, I consider that's considered the edit phase for draft 1 to draft 2. So I work out all the kinks or whatever, but I'm going to need a whole new set of play groups to do a run through out, after I've done my major cleanups. So I could very well be coming to. I know Siobhan has already expressed interest in becoming another playtester. So yeah, I'm not recruiting yet, but I will be. Of course, the challenge will be finding out, and maybe we'll stream those. That might be fun. Uh, we'll have to see how that works. So any other questions or whatever, or comments or concerns about? I see Barbarossa's been working on his town marshal. All right. That's good. Yeah, again, that's one, if the town is big enough to have a law, to have a law enforcement officer, that's one of my wanna haves in every town. And you can do a lot with a law officer, by the way. They can be the source of information if the party is looking for somebody or something. Or they can be the problem if the party is in town to steal something, or if the party is in town to do something that might be nefarious. Now, even if it's a good oriented party, if the town itself is bad or dirty, like let's say the mayor is the bad guy, and they need to do something with them. Well, then if the mayor's the bad guy, the odds are the marshal is in his back pocket. So so the lawman, and any of these characters, generally unless the cleric is an evil high priest or something, generally the cleric and the innkeeper are going to be neutrals. But the mayor and the law person and few others possibly, they might be neutrals to the party and just there for information sources, or they might be enemies. Or they might be even more than that, depending on where in your campaign arc you are. All right, one of them might be the big bad evil guy. So Tillers, I haven't played in ages, and Songbird is right. The longer you wait, the longer it'll be before you get back in. Yeah, yeah, playing an adventure and then unpacking it would actually be a good, I think that would be a good exercise for everybody, and not just me unpacking it, but having the whole group unpack it after it's done. Um, I'm going to have to take I know it's almost end of stream time, but this is a longer stream than I normally plan. I'm going to have to take a very, very brief bio break. I won't be more than 5 minutes, so anybody else that needs to also do that or take care of something, please do. I'm back. And let's get everything back in order here. Okay, let's see. Yeah, coffee goes in, coffee goes out, the circle of life. It's not just the coffee. Uh, those of you who are old enough to have the joy of blood pressure medication for life know what that means too. Oh, Esong, yeah. Need to spend a lot of time unpacking the fire hose of you. Thank you. Um, uh, Mikaro Chandra, I like the advice on the whole tutorial fight with a lone stray, but in a nice story way. It's a logical concept. Yeah. Again, I do try very hard to make sure that there's a reason behind everything that happens in the world. Um, yeah, even those introductory fights, like I said, they have nothing to do with any kind of major campaign. Undead are easy to, and like I said, they give me the opportunity to not just introduce the combat mechanic, but also the paralysis mechanic. So an undesirable effect during combat, and the longer term disease mechanic. So so we learned how the saving throws work, and how you can progress back and forth through the stages of a disease. And we learned all those good things. A few other little odds and ends too. Pathfinder has an interesting system for magic weapons and armor. So some of the treasure they gained during it was they did get a magic dagger, but that introduces another whole bunch of opportunities in Pathfinder. You can the magic on a weapon is due to runes being etched onto the weapon. But a skilled craftsperson can transfer the runes from one weapon to another. So even though they found a magic dagger, if they want to take the magic off that dagger and put it on the barbarian's greatsword, they can. Costs money, and Tugrith the blacksmith back at the inn is able to do it for them because they're not high enough level to do it themselves. But again, it introduces a game mechanic that they need to get familiar with before in order to fully advance throughout the game. So I've picked a few mechanics that I tried to deal with in Adventure 1. There's another mechanic or two in Adventure 2, but Adventure 2 is more about the environment that they're going to be spending the next quite a number of weeks in. So what are they going to learn out of all this? First of all, they're going to learn that there's all kinds of fae and that they're all over the place. They are ubiquitous, even if you don't see them at first. They're everywhere. They're going to learn that leprechauns are assholes. And they're going to learn that, besides the occasional bugbear in the forest, there are other nasty things that live in these forests, that can hurt them or kill them. So it's not just a matter of, traipsing about happily. They do need to be on their guard. And not to mention the evil gremlin. Because again, there's good fae and there's bad fae, and the bad fae can be problems. Now they're only meeting level appropriate ones now, but if there are very powerful good fae, they should hopefully reason out that there are also very powerful bad fae that they don't want to run into too early. So as far as mapping these things out in the adventure, again, the templates that are in there, that are in World Anvil, they ask all the questions you need to plan an adventure and the individual encounters for the adventure. Where they lack is in giving good place to actually write out the adventure. Now, if you're just playing for yourself, there's plenty of places where you can just throw in notes and put stuff in and get by in a session, using what shows up in the storyteller screen. I personally have a little bit more that I'm hoping for, out of this, because, eventually I want to, I would like to actually, package these things up. So eventually I'm going to need more than just what the storyteller screen will look like. But for now, as long as I can get all the bits and pieces into some place practical and get them all play tested, that'll make me happy. So I figure, if I right now slowly start the process of nudging Dimmy toward, tools for RPG publishers, like manuscript, but not exactly manuscript, then by the time I'm ready to really get into it and use it, maybe he'll have something for me. And if not, like I said, at least the assets, the pieces, the bits and pieces will all be there. Let's see what else. Tiller. So session zero with the demo fight. Um, the true session zero probably shouldn't involve any more role playing than possibly the initial party meeting. The main purpose of a session zero nowadays, especially, is to make sure your players understand the how what your world looks and feels like, and to find out from your players what they want. All right, especially if you don't know the players. If you're, if in this day of online gaming and random pickup games from people that at least one or maybe most of your players, but there's one or two that you've never played with before. You as a DM need to know: is this guy, first of all, is he into roll with an E playing, or is he into roll with two L's playing, or she? I shouldn't assume he either. Um, are what kind of players are they? What do they want out of things? Do they want lots of combat and they don't really care about puzzles? Do they want a variety of things? You need to understand where your players are coming from, because ultimately, um, your job is to entertain them while keeping yourself entertained. All right, and above and beyond, you can never forget that. All right, we're playing a game. Games are supposed to be fun. If the game stops being fun, people aren't going to play anymore. All right, so our job, first and foremost, is to make the game fun. And sometimes that means I can't do things exactly the way I want to do them because I know it's going to upset my party. Oh well, that was the compromise I made. So so anyway, session zeros are really clearing all those ground rules. So like in my case, I did run session zeros, and in session zero, I explained. Well, first of all, we did actually do a little mini fight. I just threw up a quick battle map and explained how some of the combat mechanics would work, so that they weren't completely cold in the first adventure. Um, but yeah, if you're introducing a new game system, yes, you might want to go through some mechanics in your session zero. But the most important thing to go through in your session zero is to lay out, this is a steampunk world, or this is a dark fantasy world, or this is a gothic horror world. Um, because make sure that's that at least the players understand and expect that. In my world, you're starting, like I said, you're starting in a section of the world, where not only are the regular player characters all around, but there are these fey creatures everywhere. All right, so you got good fairies and bad fairies and all the everything in between. You're starting in this wilderness. You're way away from any town. So we're not doing any sewer crawls here, not for a long time anyway. Major, very, very key major points about your world should be spelled out. The world primers that everybody talks about. What basic, simple, historical facts about your world that every character in the world would know. Those are the things you go over in a session zero, so that you're not wasting your time with them in the middle of a combat encounter and wrecking the game flow during a combat encounter. Having said that, like I said, especially if we're dealing with new players or a new gaming system, having adventure one or two, and maybe even one or two, being training exercises, is a good idea. It helps you get used to the flow too. I mean, when I played, I'll be honest. I mean, I've been a D&D player all my life. I'm quite familiar. If I was playing D&D Second Edition, I wouldn't think twice about rule mechanics and that sort of thing. I've played a number of Fifth Edition games. I'm pretty comfortable with the rule mechanics there. Um, Although I prepared myself very, very heavily. My first die rolls in the first ghoul fight with my first play group in Adventure One were that was the the first real Pathfinder 2 gaming, actual gaming that I've had a chance to do. All right, so I'm learning the game mechanics too, and you learn with the party with a new game. And again, nowadays there are so many different games out there. It's not uncommon for a group to all say together, hey, I'd like to try out this system. Laura Bones right now is she started talking about doing a series of one-offs in a game system called Lex Arcana. Um, it's a whole new system. So if that comes to fruition, from the sounds of it, the odds are she will be learning it. And those of you who are teachers out there, E Songbird, raise your hand. You'll be familiar with you teach littler kids, so it shouldn't be as much of an issue. But if there's anybody out there who's ever done any either upper high school or advanced classes or even college level teaching, as long as you, as the DM, are at least one adventure ahead of the class, then you're okay. um, you don't have to have spec'd out the final boss fight, the final level 20 boss fight in your campaign in order to start the campaign. All right. All you need to do to start the campaign is have the first adventure built. All right. And as long as you can have the second adventure built before the first adventure finishes running, then your players are going to see seamless transition from one to the other. All right. And they're going to think you're wonderful. All right. If you have to, tell them, oh, we have to skip this session because I have to create the next adventure. Yeah, that happens from time to time. If it's a regular thing, though, again, that's the kind of flow that breaks a group. So your objective again is don't worry about getting super far ahead. As long as you're a couple of steps ahead of the party, then you're doing just fine as an adventurer. All right, you don't have to lay out the entire campaign. You might lay out, again, if you have grand ideas for where an overarching campaign is going to go, then at the very highest level, bullet point them out. But you don't need to flesh them out in detail. And in fact, trying to do so early on is a waste of time. Because I can promise you, if you decide now that the next to last thing the party needs to do is X, then they will either figure out how to do it tomorrow, or they will decide that they're never going to do X, and because of their other actions along the way, X isn't even appropriate anymore. So try not to build stuff that you're never going to use. Know that you're going to build stuff that you're never going to use. All right, don't get frustrated by it. All right, but you try to avoid doing it. You realize that it's inevitable that it'll happen because the players get to make the final decisions. And again, you need to think, in order for the adventures to be exciting and fun, you do need to focus a lot on the game mechanics and understand, how difficult to make the specific encounters. And then once you know what the encounters consist of, then you focus yourself on how do I color them and flavor them, to make things interesting and exciting. And with that, it looks like it's almost time to wrap this up. So I'm going to take a quick look and see if I missed anything important. I hope everybody had a good time. Again, my stream schedules on Sundays, I'm focusing on map-related things. Sometimes that will be drawing maps. Sometimes it will be integrating maps into World Anvil worlds. I spent last Sunday and actually a quick unscheduled stream on Monday as well, sticking pins in a map I already, that already had. Scribe is going live now. Oh, I'd love to pass off the scribe. That'll be fine. What I want to do though is check the activity log, like I said, and see if I missed anything important. Let's see. That one was old. That one was old. Posture, posture, hydrate, 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 posture, hydrate, posture, hydrate, hydrate. Okay, nothing important. Good. Or nothing that hasn't been dealt with. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any other little odds and ends that might have popped up in there. All right, so I should stay here, I guess. So I guess we're gonna raid Scribe. Is he up and running now? No sooner do I ask the question than my phone tells me yes, he is. Let's see if the raid channel knows he's there. Of course it does not, because that hasn't been working forever. So we're going to raid this way. My raid call is a boring one. I need to come up with a better one. By the way, you guys have probably seen the message go by a million times. If and when I get enough subscribers to be entitled to a third emote, a third tier 1 emote, it will be a raid emote. It will feature more dinosaur-y bits. So if you want more dinosaurs in your remote collection, consider subscribing, please. Again, don't forget to pop over to YouTube and hit a subscribe there too. And in the meantime, yes, trample is the raid call, and let's go a raiding. Raid scribe of Nicoti. And thank you all for coming. See you again.